Right, I do believe that we are going live, and I'm going to take a couple of seconds just to allow this transaction that happens between the atmosphere and all this Wi-Fi stuff, and I don't know, all this technical stuff I'm just not very good at. But I'm didn't have my countdown timer, guys, this morning, so I hope that if you're joining us from LinkedIn or even YouTube, that you can hear us. Please post a comment if you're there. Will certainly help me to know that I'm on time and I'm talking the right things. But my guest today, I'm very, very impressed with my guest today because I won't say he's greedy, but he hasn't just done one TED Talk, he's done two. And also, not just one book that's been published, but two. And I want to make sure that this is going live and that if there's anyone there that's watching, great. Adrian, thank you so much. I'm going to put you up there just so that you save the day for me, Adrian. Thank you. We can hear and see you. Yay!
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, and my guest today is Hamza Khan. As I was just saying, Hamza is not only, well, he's a little bit greedy because not just one TED Talk, that wasn't enough. Two TED Talks, okay? And not just one book, Hamza, two books, okay? So this is the kind of place that you've been in terms of your overachieving, which we will come around to talking about, an overachiever, but also a big fan of hip hop. And dare I mention the name Jay-Z? And we know
Hey.
that Jay-Z is married to Beyonce. So
Yes.
there's a lot going on there. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. And also Hamza's attitude towards leadership and management styles, because really and truly, we are now in the 21st century, but we're behaving as if we're operating in the 19th century, which is where all our ideas around leadership sort of kind of came from. Probably before that, I'm sure, but definitely in a mechanical and mechanized way, in a very structured way. It's come from there. So I'm not going to witter on too much. I'll tell you more about Hamza, and he'll tell you more about his company SkillsCamp. But let's just cut to the chase. Tell me about Jay-Z.
Oh
I've
my
been,
goodness.
come on, let's just jump straight in there because, everyone's thinking, did you say Jay-Z? What does he have to do with management? And Joy's particular session today, which is all about business and emotional intelligence. But Jay-Z has had an impact on you. Tell me more.
My goodness, Joy. I wasn't ready. Thank you. What a glowing introduction, if I may first say that. An absolute joy, no pun intended. I'll probably make that joke 10 more times throughout our
I'm
entire
so used to
conversation.
it. I love it. So don't worry.
I love meeting somebody whose name is both a noun and a verb, and an emotion to boot on top of that. So thank you. Thank you for making the
I'm a
time.
triple time winner. What can I
There
say?
you go. There you go. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to chat with you, to share our dialogue with your community. And thank you for just your warmth, your generosity of spirit, and the creativity of your questions. I've been waiting a long time to answer this question. Why does Jay-Z feature so prominently in my writing and in my speaking? I'm a fan, first and foremost, of hip hop. I have a deep appreciation for hip hop as an art form, as a form of expression, spoken word, the great oral history um, of marginalized communities, of people experiencing oppression, being able to use their words to articulate what it is that they're going through and normalize that experience for people like myself who experienced versions of the struggle, and then were galvanized by the likes of Jay-Z and other artists and other poets and speakers to similarly express ourselves and our stories. And so I think back to a New York Times interview that Jay-Z did. I believe it was around the time of the album Kingdom Come. So this would have been 2015, or maybe it was later. Maybe it was with the most recent album. But he said, our job, like what a person should be doing with their time on earth, is acting out through their God-given talents. And he's I don't want to get too carried away here, but there's so many
You are
references I want to make to interviews.
you are such a fan, Hamza. I'm going to have to stop you because I think you could talk
Please,
about Jay-Z for an hour,
I could
if not longer. I know you could,
easily,
but you
easily.
are a big fan. And the big question then is, in terms of emotional intelligence and in terms of business leadership, he has actually influenced the way that you manage human beings.
Hmm.
And all I can think of, how did he do that? Did he sing a song? Did he do whatever? But you know what? What was the influence? Because
Yeah.
I know him as a singer. I don't know Beyonce personally, even though, funnily enough, Hamza, I did interview her when she was in Destiny's Child. So there's like a full
Actually,
circle thing here happening for
where
me
can I
and
find this
you.
interview?
Yeah, wow, buried somewhere. But
I gotta find this.
yeah, but really, music and business, we don't put them together. Even though if you've been involved in the music business, and I did get into it in my early days, um, understanding the business of music is really, really important. But Jay-Z and his leadership style have had an impact on you. And I'm sure everyone's just curious, how? How is that
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah, let me just get more granular here because I do realize I was spitting with the first question that you asked, and my answers were in the best way possible, droning on. And that's because, again, there's just so much that I want to tap into, so much I want to bring to the surface. There was going to be a logical conclusion to my answer, but I'm glad you interrupted me.
Hamza,
Um,
Hamza, people that watch me will know that Joy doesn't tolerate any of that. So I'm sorry. I'll just have to treat you the same as I treat everybody else. I'm going to
I
rein you
appreciate
in
that.
sometime. Rein
No,
you in.
thank you, thank you. I'm also running on 5 hours of sleep too, so there's a little bit of that going on. Okay, what is it about Jay Z that speaks to me and specific to his leadership style? His leadership style is one that transcends the binary of the theory X and theory Y style of management. So the theory X style of management is assuming the worst in your employees. It's top down, it's authoritarian, it's autocratic. Theory Y is much more laissez-faire, it's bottom up, you lead up and out, it's transformational in nature. But actually, Abraham Maslow, whose work was unfinished towards the end of his life, published some writings on a theory Z, which transcends work itself. It's something that is much more spiritual. And I believe that art is a spiritual form,
Activity.
practice, an
Yeah, yeah,
activity. It's it's
yeah.
it's it's abstract. And so for someone like Jay-Z, an artist, to then bring that same energy into the empire that he's built. And I'm speaking specifically, I'm going to isolate Rock Nation, his record label, to see the artists that are represented on Rock Nation, the likes of Rihanna, Beyonce, DJ Khaled, so on and so forth. He has other leaders that are also part of his extended network. What Jay-Z has done is a masterclass in letting go of power. And that's the Theory Z style of management over there. It's not about him as the leader. It's about everybody else around him. It's about empowering the community. And if you study his music from the very first album and every single interview, he talks about the same thing. And so coming back to that New York Times interview that I was referencing in the previous answer, he said that our role is to extend the runway of possibility for others. If you have leadership abilities, if you have power, if you have the capacity, extend the runway of possibility for others. A leader creates more leaders. And that's what Jay-Z models for me, among many other people, but he's my
Yes.
favorite case study
And
because of my personal interest in the music, in the art form, of the resonance that I feel with Jay-Z, Sean Carter as a person. But of course, it's not an idea unique to Jay-Z. For
And what I
example,
was
one of
going to
my
say
earliest
that I
mentors.
was going to say, Hamza, that this whole thing about the music business, and we're now talking about the music business, and people probably thinking, "Goodness me, aren't we supposed to be being very serious here?" And we're on LinkedIn, or it's YouTube, a bit different, but LinkedIn, oh,
Mm,
it's very serious stuff, and just trying to get people to wrap their head around the fact that there are different management styles. And if you've ever been involved in the music industry, I personally have been, and you definitely know a lot
mhm.
about it
I've
too,
been as well. Yeah,
is that exactly is that record labels tend to be, again, have a very sort of top down kind of behavior. They tell the
sure.
artist what to do,
Yes.
okay, and the artist does it. And lots of
Yes.
artists get dropped from labels. I know that too, for various reasons. So, and then you get a new wave of artists coming along who actually want to be autonomous. They want to be their own person. and they want to put out the music that they love, not what I tell them to do, because I've looked at the financials and we need another, we need another hit, and we need another pop song because there's somebody out there doing this, or we need a rock song because somebody else is doing that. We want to be individuals and we want to be true to ourselves. And that particular essence is something which I think you tend to look for when you are working for people, when you're managing people, and it's kind of influenced the way that you are as a manager. So that's why I was making that link
Hmm.
between music and business, and really how it's impacted the way that you have led, because you became a very young leader. I think
Yes.
you were 21 years old,
Yeah. Early 20s. Yeah.
Hamza. Yeah. And I've met a couple of people in these interviews, and they have started out, you know, at that age, and they've been basically had people older than them working for them. And I just wondered, how did you sort of cross that divide between having being young yourself, being a manager in charge of people, and also having older people above you?
Yeah, great question. I think I had two things working for me, or three things really. Number one, I credit my parents with all the success that I get to experience today, and I think I will experience. I think I was well parented. I was loved by both of my parents, in spite of other challenges in our upbringing related to our intersectionality, socioeconomic status. The one thing that was consistent is that I received love from mom and dad. So I always had that disposition towards every relationship in my life, personal, professional, and academic. I just started from a place of kindness, compassion, and love, frankly. So there was that. I'm also naturally very shy, meek, bashful, socially awkward. Uh, this is a rare opportunity to actually speak to Hamza Khan, because usually when I'm on stage, I'm using my alter ego. And I actually wrote about that on LinkedIn earlier today, where I talk about like HK, this construct that goes up there that's much more camera friendly. It's, my equivalent of Jay-Z, but I'm right now you're speaking to I guess the equivalent of Jay-Z, Sean Carter, Hamza Khan. So there's that, the well parenting, the being well parented, being loving, kind, compassionate, also being shy, and then being young. Like, it was a triple threat that led me going into leadership situations earlier in my career, in which people that I managed were older than me, much more experienced than I was, feeling a tremendous amount of fear and insecurity. So what I did is I just overcompensated in the other direction. I said, I can't manage you. I was just honest. I said, you're you're an adult, perfectly capable of managing yourself. I'm here to just manage workflow and priorities. And using the music business analogy that you shared earlier, I just want to remove the business from this so that you can focus on your art. Let me handle the business. You focus on the art.
Wow.
And bringing it back to sort of the Jay-Z example, right? Like, that was a role that Damon Dash played during the early days of Rockefeller, where Jay-Z was the artist and Damon Dash was the shit insulator, if you will, who had all the difficult conversations with the Leo Cohens of the world, and dealt with all the distributors, and just insulated Jay-Z so that he could be great. And
Just do
that's the
his
approach that I
music.
took.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the approach that I take. And I have a deep understanding of that as an artist as well. Like, in my soul, I'm an artist. I'm very eager to get back to art. I think I'm on a large detour right now, doing this thing of entrepreneurship and thought leadership and building businesses and, media, all that stuff. And I'm grateful for it. But this is all an attempt to get back to art in a pure way.
And when you
So
say
I
art, are we
understand.
talking about you want to be a rapper, or you want to run a record label, or
You heard it
you want
here
to be
first.
or you want to be Van Gogh, or I don't know, what do you want to do when you say art? Because art is
Okay,
so broad. You might want to be on
sure.
the stage as an actor or a dancer.
Yeah,
Or I
yeah, yeah.
don't know. I haven't got a
A little
clue.
bit of
But
everything, right? So when my
a
first
poet,
foray into art was visual.
you've done the writing. So I was going to say
Yeah.
poet, but you are obviously an artistic person. That's, I won't say has got trapped in business, because artists
No, it's a
still have to
detour.
have a business head,
Yeah.
you know. But we're all, I think, everything that we do is about creativity, Hamza. And somewhere along the line, we do get boxed in by our own attitudes about business, about work, how we're supposed to work. And I know that you definitely have got very strong views around the way that we work and why we work the way we do, and what school might have done to us, put us into boxes. But yeah, your style is quite modern, okay, but there are older fashioned ideas that still exist. I suppose dating back to the Industrial Revolution when
Sure. Even
things were
before then, the
pretty like
agricultural revolution, we can
the
start there with
agricultural
economic surplus.
revolution. Yeah, because we're looking at management styles and bringing it, pulling it forward, and we got a lot of people struggling with how to manage, full stop, because they step into positions where they haven't been trained for starters, but also the COVID has had a big impact in the way
Huge.
that people want to work. So we're looking
Indelible.
at people power in a way, and people voting with their feet and enjoying this new hybrid way of working. Uh, Working from home, great. I read a report that they're trying to send people back to the office 5 days a week with little incentives, little carrots, but people are just not interested
No.
in doing that anymore. But you have just embraced this new way of being a leader. And I think that's what we really should dive some more into, because what's the difference? You mentioned the theory X and the theory Y. Some
Yeah.
people may not be familiar with that, but carrot and stick to lead people, encourage them to do things, or whip, you know, pain or a bit of carrots in front of you,
Yeah.
or pain
Passion,
or pleasure.
aversion, pain, pleasure, all
Yes,
these dichotomies make
yeah.
sense, right? And like even theory X, theory Y, when you really distill the literature on leadership down, there's only really two styles of leadership. There's dominance and there's prestige. And dominance is exactly what it sounds like. It's top down, it's foot on your neck. And then there's prestige, which is replicate this because you are motivated intrinsically to replicate something that's good for you. And that's the core difference. The dominant style is very rarely voluntarily replicated, almost never voluntarily replicated, because nobody wants to perpetuate that style of feeling, that way of that way of feeling. Prestige based, which then spawns things like transformational leadership, servant leadership, laissez-faire leadership, hands off, so on and so forth. That's the style that when you think about the best boss you ever had, you know exactly who it is, right? If I told you, Joy, think about the best boss you've ever had and think about the worst boss you've ever had, right away, two
Mm.
faces pop up.
Yeah, the one
And
not looking over my shoulder, checking on me all the
exactly,
time. That's the one
exactly.
I can't stand.
And that's the boss who practiced dominant style of leadership. And it could have taken different forms. It could have been, they created a toxic triangle structure of an organization. Maybe they had dark triad traits. Maybe they were malevolent, whatever the case may be, but you just vowed in your soul, never again. You don't want to be that person. You don't want to make other people feel the way that you felt. So I almost have like an elementary approach to this work. And so I think you're being very kind, Joy, in saying that I, advanced or embody this modern style of leadership. But actually, this predates both of us. This is going back to early indigenous communities and the way indigenous tribes were structured. I'm continuing that tradition. I truly believe that the future of work is going to require an ancient prescription, going back to flat organizations, going back to holocracies, the way things were before the turning point of the agricultural revolution, followed by successive industrial revolutions that created an industrial approach, a one size fits all model to managing people. And people don't want to be managed. We want to manage things. We want to manage budgets, processes, events, inventories, but people are meant to be led. And that's what is missing from the post COVID dialogue of insisting on people get back into the office because of some sort of sunk cost fallacy. We have real estate that we need to justify, but people's equations for what they value have completely changed as a result of not just the plague, but the wars that are happening, the recession that's going on right now. People value something totally different. And I would argue that they've valued it from the beginning, but they also went on a detour. They were convinced by the status quo that you had to be in an office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, especially if you were if you were a knowledge worker. But that's no longer the case. Leaders can insist on people returning to the office, but they're going to be hard pressed to attract and retain and engage, more importantly, top talent.
Yes, yes. And you in particular, Hamza, you mentioned the millennials. Now I'm way past being a millennial. I'm like in the on the other foot in the other camp. But there's a lot said about the young generation who are now becoming the predominant force in like the workforce. They don't like to be managed in the way that I might have accepted when I was younger.
Mm,
Turn up, specific time, be there. If you're late, people give you dirty looks. If you leave late, people give you dirty looks again. You try and work all the hours that you can do without much praise or encouragement, apart from a pay slip. That's it. I didn't demand that much from work, even though I came out of university quite bubbly and quite smart and
Sure.
quite keen about joining the workforce, and then suddenly went into a company, and it was like, is this really what work is? Because you're not
Extinguished your
using your
light.
brain. It took my light out
Yeah,
completely,
yeah, I
Hamza,
get
which
it.
almost
Happened to me
brings us
too.
it brings us round to the idea. I mean, you've got 2 books, you've got the book on the leadership reinvented, okay,
Mm,
which is a little bit of what we've been talking about now, another, great title. And then also we've got the burnout book, which is the burnout gamble.
yeah,
Now, me and you do have a lot in common with burnout, but I didn't really notice when I first started working that there was such a thing. I was like 23-ish, I think. But I wanted to work hard. I think human beings want to get something juicy and fulfilling out of the number of hours that they spend away
yeah.
from their
Meaning.
home. They want to get some meaning and purpose. Now,
Sure.
that's kind of like taken off the map when I'm saying to you, Hams, or you're saying to me, well, Joy, do X, Y, Z, and I'll give you some money. And
Yeah.
that's it. And it may not be what I want to do, but I do
No.
it. So this whole thing about for me, having my light extinguished by work and falling into burnout. And again, now it's happening to me as well. I've confessed on LinkedIn that I have been getting close to what I know. I should know better because I know all this stuff. I've been getting close to the point where I'm exhausted,
Mm,
and I've been losing my interest in life, and
sure.
uh, you know,
Cynicism is creeping in. I get
since
it.
losing contact with friends. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
and
sorry to
and
hear
when
this.
I listened to your second TED talk, which was completely all about burnout.
Yeah,
So perhaps we can talk a little bit about that too. I mean, we
yeah,
understand the world of work is changing and that human beings do want to work differently. We also
yeah.
need different types of leaders. People don't want to be managed, they want to be led. I
Right.
get that. And I think everybody in and of themselves is a leader of one, which is another great thing that a friend said to me. But your move from being a bright-eyed young man full of energy, doing things, managing people, and then boom,
Yeah,
you were about to go on holiday, I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
So
yeah,
tell us about the itinerary that you had for your
yeah,
holiday.
yeah, yeah. It was absurd. It
Way
was
back
an
way back then.
overachiever's itinerary. It was Toronto to New York, New York to Milan, Milan to Prague, Prague to Amsterdam, and Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur.
And you
It was
call that
supposed to be,
holiday, yeah?
I know, right? A holiday would be toes in the water, ass in the sand, not a worry in the world, cold beer in my hand, right? That's what it should
That's
be.
it, that's it.
But what I had planned was clearly a trip, and I believe that that is what I needed to do in order to fill my energy buckets that I had been pouring from that were completely depleted by the end of that year, 2014, when I burned out. And I told myself that I would take this miraculous trip around the world and I'd recover like a phoenix from the ashes and hustle all over again. But my body had other plans. It said, if hold on, Hamza, not this time. It hit me with the Dikembe Mutombo. It's like, no, you're not going to go on this trip. And I learned the hard way that if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. If you don't pick the time to relax, your body will pick it for you. And it usually picks the most inconvenient of times. When it happened to me, it was so strange because I was caught off guard. Nothing like that had
Yes.
happened to me before, or at least that I was able to perceive. Now, of course, upon deeper reflection, I did realize that something similar happened in 2007 when I was an intern in the music business, actually. And there I worked for, I think, 72 hours straight, just took little naps here and there, eager to prove myself. And I ended up blacking out in one of the bathrooms for 10 to 12 hours, just passed out due to exhaustion. But because I was so afraid of what had happened, it felt like a completely alien experience. I brushed it under the rug, didn't tell anybody about it, especially my boss, lest I be perceived as somebody who couldn't hack it in the industry. But when I burned out again 7 years later, this time it was in public. People knew that it happened. My boss knew it happened. And strangely, when I look back at it, and it's not so strange now knowing what I know, I burned out in one of Canada's top employers, a place that said all the right things, had all the right um, mechanisms in
Policies and
place,
procedures, and
policies in
yes,
place,
I
procedures,
know.
the wellness packages that would allow for a massage every week if I wanted it, and it happened over there. And so if it could happen to me, somebody who was optimized for productivity, somebody who managed their stress relatively well, somebody who had all the supports and the safeguards, my goodness, it can happen to anybody else in that case.
Yeah.
And
And that
th-
brings me round to thinking, Hamza, that, because I read something recently around, it's kind of blaming the employer in a way for the conditions that push people towards overworking. And yeah, that is an issue in itself. It's a kind of culture, isn't it? Unspoken culture. But
mhm.
there is the responsibility on the individual as well for what's happening. But then we kind of go into work quite blindly. And as I said, this desire to do something really well, to give it 100%, just like an athlete, we go there, we want to do our best, we want to do it quickly, we want to get that gold star or that trophy or that medal. And it's kind of the inner person who goes to work to get that can sometimes be blind to the physical things that are happening because we just want to achieve. So you mentioned about being a high achiever, but in a way, it kind of changed your whole attitude towards the word high achiever.
Yeah, truly. And on that note, like I get asked that question a lot. It's like, what is the individual's responsibility? And I think the individual does have a responsibility to manage their time, their energy, and their attention and show up primed every single day, ready to do the best work that they can. But I'm not convinced that the onus is on the individual these days to mitigate burnout, to keep stress at bay. I think that I don't even think, I just know based on the data alone, and lived experience is a whole other story that I could use to substantiate this, but that the variance in employee engagement scores rests almost exclusively with leadership. Conservatively, leaders account for 70% of the variance in employee engagement scores, according to Gallup, which means that I could show up to work. I could be ready to go. But, Joy, if you are a toxic leader, if you are a dark triad leader, you have subclinical levels of Machiavellianism, psychopathy, narcissism, you could still extinguish my
You're
light.
gonna have to slow down and say that again because I'm sure everyone's going, "Well, what did he say? What
Sure,
did he
sure.
say?"
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
we had about 3 or 4 descriptive things there, which all didn't sound great, but let's hear them.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Let me get a
Machiavellian,
little, let me get a little more elementary with that, right? Like if you want to understand
please.
what evil is, what is a bad actor in the workplace? They have something known as the dark core of personality. We actually all have it, but we manage it quite well. Joy, I think you and I manage it well, but some people, they don't, or they choose to operationalize and maximize it. And the dark core of personality, according to Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman, is the reckless tendency to maximize individual utility while accepting, neglecting, or provoking the disutility of others. In other words, it's take care of me first at everybody else's expense. Let me increase my riches, let me increase my power, let me secure my position whilst trampling over people. So that's the provoking, while accepting the suffering of others or neglecting, turning a blind eye to the inequities in an organization. And people who are really good at this, people who are great at maximizing the dark core, they manifest one of three personalities, usually all three. It's subclinical levels of narcissism. So self-aggrandizement. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sorry, I'm running on
That's
5 hours of
fine.
sleep.
Not self
Aggrandizement,
narcissism,
right?
yep. Mm.
And then there's
Aggrandizement. I can't say it.
aggrandizement. There we go. That's the American in me coming out. And then there's Machiavellianism, which is just scheming, manipulating. And then there's psychopathy, characterized by lack of empathy. And that's
Power of
called the
3,
dark
eh?
triad, the dark triad
Wow.
of personality.
We. You read some
Yeah.
really heavy, deep books. I think there's a therapist in you dying to come out, Hamza.
Yeah.
Some of the things you just said to me there, even though I don't, I do operate in this one, I'm thinking, wow, you are like PhD, I don't know, going on to study more. This is a place which you have definitely studied to a high degree. And yeah, I accept that human beings, good, bad, we know that. And there's no reason why you wouldn't get the same kind of representation within organizations, but then also at certain levels within organizations.
But
So I'm
Joel,
hearing what you're saying. Yeah,
I
go on
appreciate
then.
that, but let me just bring it back. Like, let me just why is this relevant? Because it does. I'm just going to quote Dr. Christina Maslach, one of the preeminent burnout researchers. She said that workplaces can be very unhealthy environments. If you take a plant and put it in a pot and don't water it and give it lousy soil and not enough sunlight, I don't care how gorgeous the plant was to begin with, it isn't going to thrive.
True.
And
I've
that's
done it
really
many
it.
a time. I've done it many a time, Hamza, and they're all in the garden, all the plants that I've managed to murder and kill. Yeah. So it
Right.
doesn't work.
And 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 the extent to which the workplace is broken, it's comical to me. And there's nothing funny about it because work is life, right? When we talk about the future of work, we're really talking about the future of life. I have a niece, she's 2 years old. In 14 years, she's going to be eligible to enter into the workplace. And I'm terrified that I'm not doing enough with the time that I have allocated towards me, to me every single day, to change the world so that when she steps into it, that her light is not going to be extinguished. Because some of
Mm.
these stats, comical is not the right word. They're just they're
Tragic.
absurd to me. They're tragic. They're
Mm.
tragic to me. And I
Yeah.
sometimes laugh in a very sort of dark way at just how broken this is and how much I have to pull my punches whenever I write about this, whenever I speak about this, to appease an audience that isn't ready to receive just how bad the problem is. And so let me share this with you right now. And I think it's perfect that I'm
Well,
running on five
this is
hours of
kind of
sleep.
like an exclusive, isn't it? And you might be a little bit more open because you're
I
tired,
am.
Hamza. So pick and choose your
Yeah.
word.
No, I am. I'm tired. I'm jet lagged, but that's a good thing because I think that I'm at my most clear when I'm trying to work through fog. So let me just give you some of the stats that I know to be true, right? So according to Gallup, 70% of employees don't feel heard and therefore don't feel appreciated. And so for anybody who says, hey, this theory X style of management, top down, authoritarian, autocratic style that you're describing, that's passe. Nobody's really practicing that anymore. To which I would say, sir, ma'am, hold on. 70% of employees don't feel heard. That to me is the clearest evidence that there's dehumanizing practices still alive and well in most organizations. To make another person feel like their opinion doesn't matter, that indicates to me the presence of the dark triad, the dark core of personality, and the theory X style of management. So it's still very much at play. Then you layer into that 77% of employees, and that's conservative because that number goes as high as 85% when you zoom out of North America and you look at global data of employees are disengaged at work. They're not engaged with the thing that they're doing. They're not getting meaning from it. And then within that spectrum, you also have people that are actively disengaged, i.e., they resent the organization and are therefore engaged in sabotage of it. That is wild to me. Just imagine, Joy, that there was a sign on the beach that said that if you wade into these waters, there's an 85% chance that you're going to get bitten by a shark. I'm
I,
not going in the water. I don't know about
You
you.
know what, Hamza? I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm also thinking that what's new? I think work has been that kind of place where there's that kind of statement that you're lucky if you find a job that you really love doing. And I think when we set out as fresh-faced 16-year-olds, 17, 18, whenever we enter the workforce, 20 something for me, we're expectant, we're very positively expectant of good things. And then the old ways of working are being reinforced year after year, and you have to fall in line or there's the door.
Well, then
So,
we then we, then
so
we have to
what
ask
you're
the question, Joy.
describing is interesting. I hear the dark forces, and I hear, and we only have to watch the news to see some of the leaders who we would definitely describe as toxic. But if that's happening within the workplace, which is a representation of the bigger world, Hamza, the onus is then, as you said, on us to try and change things, which is what you're doing by, I suppose, speaking out, talking about this stuff, and being quite brave today, and just sharing stuff which I've not heard you speak about before, be quite honest.
Yeah, and I think my eagerness to speak about them, and thank you for that. My eagerness to speak about them, the passion with which I speak about them, is really coming from a place of frustration that I've been doing this now for 10 years, and not only am I not moving the needle, I mean, I'm moving it for my immediate community. I see the evidence in, for example, just how normalized the term burnout has become and how comfortable people are talking about servant leadership. So I'm grateful that I see the impact in a small way, but I'm not really moving the needle on 9 billion people. I think that this Titanic is headed towards the iceberg. And I'm terrified. And I think I have at best 14 years in the case of my niece, if I'm just thinking very selfishly about somebody in my family whose spark I don't want to extinguish. But I know that she's going to end up in a workplace where 94% of people, according to KPMG, feel stressed. Can you imagine that? 94%, almost every
Mm.
single person
And
in a
I
workplace
agree
experiences
that,
undue stress.
and the
And
world
how
of
about
work
this one,
is
Joy?
changing.
Can I give you one
Go
more?
go for it. Go
80%
for
of
it.
people feel like they don't belong in their workplace. Can you imagine that?
What
And then
percentage
you
was
layer
that?
80%, according to the American Psychological
Feel that they
Association,
don't belong.
that they don't belong in their workplace, that they don't feel like it's a place where they can thrive. Wild. So to me,
I
there's this invisible problem,
But
and
in a
it's
way though,
invisible. So go ahead.
but Hamza, the thing is, you see, okay, so we're getting quite deep into the stats and the way that the world
Sure.
is working, and the changes that we want to make happen. But really and truly, I know that it's a model which has been around for the longest amount of time. Perhaps things were worse. Perhaps we don't know how good things are, Hamza, without trying to wind you up in any kind of way. But the majority of people that I know, perhaps that you know, we have what we call comfortable lives. Comfortable lives, okay. But I can hear the responsibility that you're feeling for relatives and friends who are still young enough to be coming through a system. You're wondering what they're going to hit. Now, the world of work is changing, and this thing about entrepreneurship, you yourself became an entrepreneur. So the concern that you feel for your niece might not be a thing. Work. Don't get me started on work anyway. But the hours that people have to work and the people that having to work with zero contracts and stuff. Now that upsets me, but that's another thing. But you are concerned and you are talking about it, and I think that's where change happens because there
Yeah.
are other people who feel just like you feel. I feel exactly the way that you feel, okay? And I've got nieces and nephews coming through too. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so without getting too sort of stuck in, well, stuck in the sadness, dare I say, um, Hamza. I also like to, my name's Joy. I've got to bring a bit of
Yeah. Yeah.
light,
Yeah.
a bit of
I get it.
light to the situation,
Sure.
and we
Sure.
got to remember all these lovely mantras that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
what has the most power. You know, if you have a room that's full of light and you take something dark into it, does it have an impact? No. But if you have a dark room and bring a bit of light into it, it has an impact. So
Yeah.
your desires are going to have an impact and you'll attract other people that feel just like you. This whole thing about leadership is still there, you
Mm.
know, and you mentioned, I think it might have been on one of your TED Talks, that you ended up becoming a manager, even though you don't like the word manage. But
Yeah.
that was at the request of the people that were your team.
Yeah. 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 Allow me to preface and thank you for making that distinction, right? Like I realize that these stats can be depressing. I realize that my delivery of them can be stress inducing. Um, I realize that I feel the tension in my shoulders and my jaw and my fists when I'm sharing this. But I'm truly an optimist. I'm truly hopeful, and I'm truly consumed by joy. No pun intended, right? The second time I use that one. When it comes to the future of work, I believe that when we take a wider view of time, the fact that we're even having this conversation right now, as freely as we are, is an indication that we're moving in the right direction. I might not wear that expression on my face because I get really pensive, but I'm very hopeful. I think we're going to make the right series of decisions. But coming back to your question, I was given the title of manager, and I was expected to manage, but I think that was just a technicality. I think I was a leader from the get-go. I had great leaders around me. The three people who shaped my leadership philosophy very early in my life. Actually, before them was my dad and my uncle. Different story. Um, very much instilled in
But that's
me.
where it starts. That's exactly where it starts.
That's where it started, but I didn't really intuit the lessons of leadership at the time. For me, though, that was a masterclass in entrepreneurship and servant leadership and serving customers. But when it came to managing staff and how to be a good leader to the people that report into you, I learned that from Drew Dudley, from Alan Grant, from Lisa Arneson. A sort of like a holy trinity of leaders in my life, if you will. And I learned different lessons from each of them. But the big lesson that they all shared was making it about others, not making it about myself, about giving power away. And I learned this in some very vivid ways. I mean, Lisa actually had me leave the job while I was on top, while I was succeeding. She was like, no, you got to go spread your wings, leave this, go experience another adventure, and then come back when you're ready. But reach the end. There's a finite amount of leading that you can do. That's actually what Alan taught me from the get-go. In our very first meeting, in my newly minted role as a leader, the first set of instructions that I received on day one were make yourself obsolete. So when that starts, when your leadership journey starts with somebody telling you to write yourself out of a job by the end of the year, Joy, you're speaking to somebody whose career, whose life is an echo of that conversation that happened nearly 20 years ago. And then when it comes to servant leadership, I mean, Drew Dudley exemplifies that. I've got his book right behind me, Day One Leadership. It's all about just the inner work that a leader can do to show up and help others. So
And I
I
hear
think
that
change is
because
coming.
because in a way, that's an interesting way to use the word leadership, because what they're doing is seeing the potential in somebody, and they're encouraging that to grow, a bit like we said about the plant and the water and the sunlight, and they're prepared to let you spread your wings and disappear, because there's a real thing, a real fear, I suppose, within companies, really. You human resources, as human beings are called, we're actually human beings, but human
Mhm.
resources, if you are developing them, then you are giving all of those assets away to somebody else. So you're not going to encourage them to leave in the way that has been. But really and truly, we were looking at the way in which we're going to have to look after people. And this word, humanize, the workplace, this fear that people will become lazy and troublesome and God knows whatever other negative words they can put above our head. When actually we want to get as much out of working as they want to get the work out of us. So it's interesting, the dynamics that are happening, and they're changing. You just described a model where someone has said to you, after a year, I want you to spread your wings, disappear, grow, blah, blah, blah. You go with my blessing. And I'm
Yeah,
sure that there are other leaders out there that are doing the same, but they might be the minority. But that's what human beings want. But it's
Joy.
a bit at
Yeah,
odds with the fact that we have to go into work and produce whatever product or service we're being paid to do, and then leave. But it's a short-sighted way of viewing human beings.
truly.
Everyone's being shortchanged.
Yeah, and you dropped the F word a few moments ago. You said fear, right? That you really got to the heart of it. There's only two primordial emotions, love and fear. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is most famous for the 5 stages of grief, said that there's only two emotions that encompass all other emotions, love and fear. And we can never feel both at the same time. And fear is interesting because that's the thing that produces stress, which then results in people closing organizations and optimizing for the dark triad traits and leading these top-down pyramid structures that are disengaging people. What happens, according to Stephen A. Hopfall's conservation of resources theory, is that people experience psychological stress in 3 scenarios. When there is a threat of a loss of resources, so when you think you're going to lose something, when you've actually lost something, when there's a net loss of resources, or when you feel like there's been an insufficient reward following an investment of resources. So it all comes back to loss of possessions, loss of energy, loss of time, loss of money. And what we do to form a buttress bulwark against future loss is we become more insular. We become more conservative in our thinking. We become more protective, and naturally, organizations become asymmetrical. And that's at the root of the problem that we have today. People are holding on to the things that they should be giving away, especially power. And so what Lisa did for me was an act of love, because she could have kept me there. We could have kept on winning awards. We could have kept on being the bright, shiny ball that was, earning all the attention in the institution at the time. She would have had a workhorse in me that would have been comfortable spending the rest of my career there. But she engaged in an act of love, and love, when we divorce it from its romantic connotations and we look at the beautiful ways in which love has been described in different cultures. For example, the Greeks have 8 different definitions of love, but my favorite definition was found in About Love by Bell Hooks. And I think it's M. Scott Peck that she was quoting. Love is the desire to invest in the spiritual development of another person. And that to me is profound,
which is
because
what
that's
she,
ultimately what
yes.
Abraham Maslow wanted with transcendence. We know what Abraham Maslow's pyramid looks like.
Oh,
It's
yes. Oh,
self-actualization at the
yes.
top, but that's actually a misconception. His model was co-opted, of course, by, economic schools to find ways to drive productivity. But you look at his later writings, and he was talking about a step above self-actualization, which was transcendence, going
Transcendence, yes.
beyond that. And
Mm.
that's what Lisa did for me. Lisa said, at a time when I need you to stay, I'm going to empower you to go because that's in your best interest.
Right. That
And that to me
she
is the
was a
ultimate power. One hundred percent.
modern day leader,
He was a
and I
golden
don't
oldie, a goldie.
Golden Holdie, that's me. That's me, actually. I've got now 2 questions, okay,
Sure.
from the audience, and we really wanna, let's dive into, let's see what the first one was. I'll put it up. There's an awful lot of it. It's probably gonna fill the complete screen, but let's see how it goes. Right, this is from Corrie, and, she says, "What would be the percentage of those who feel that they don't belong in their workforce also feel that they don't belong in the world?" So that's an interesting thing. We're looking at belonging on that, was it meta level, then building it out a bit more macro, all these words. That's a question. And
Mm.
then she thinks it may be more an internal struggle that is dictating their own future in other aspects of their life, including their career. So that I'm going to have to wrap my head around that, Corey.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. Can you unpick that one for me, or?
Excellent question, Corey. I'm described as a future of work thought leader, and I'm happy to embody that role, because it makes sense to the audience. But we both know, everybody watching this knows, that the future of work is the future of life, considering that we spend conservatively 60% of our life engaged in some sort of productive work. So the question of belonging at work is really a question of belonging in general in the world. And I talked about this in the Burnout Gamble, and I build on it in Leadership Reinvented. Let me start in the opposite direction. There's 4 undeniable characteristics of the world that we live in right now: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. These are things that are happening with or without our permission, whether or not we acknowledge them. The world is only becoming more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The goalposts are continuously shifting. And as a result, we're at the behest of, I'd say, 5 meta factors: global levels of competition that are intensifying, profound feelings of alienation, societal pressures and expectations, rapid technological developments, and economic flux. Now, what happens is that in an attempt to cope with these external changes, in lieu of community care, in lieu of a better system in which Joy and Hamza and Corey are looking out for each other, we make the mistake of internalizing our position that is shifting in this VUCA world as performance pressure. And we believe when we wake up any day that we're not perfect enough, we're not efficient enough, we're not progressive enough, we're not satisfied enough, we're not innovative enough. And this contributes to our downward spiral into feelings of less and less belonging. We don't feel like we belong in the world. We don't feel like we belong at work. And then this ultimately cascades all the way down to the time at which we're recording this, Joy, where burnout is at an all-time high and mental health is at an all-time low. And you can
Mm.
look this up. These stats are substantiated by the American Psychological Association and Employee Benefit News. But forget about the stats. We know this. I know this. I know that I'm walking around every single day with 20,000 cubic square feet of pressure that I can't see, but I know that I feel. So yes, the Venn diagram of people who feel like they don't belong at work and who don't belong in the
In
world,
the world, yes.
I think they're one and the same. So
It's
thank you for asking that,
becoming
Corey.
it's becoming, closer is what you mean. It's they're overlapping more.
They're overlapping, but
Yeah,
let
yeah.
me flip this,
Interesting
Corey.
question from Corey. That
Can I
was a
just
good question,
can
wasn't
I
it?
offer some hope here though, right? I
Please
I
do.
am aware that I'm passionate about this. I'm aware that I'm fired up. I feel it in my body. I recognize it in the tone of my voice, in the tenor of this conversation. But I'm saying all of this so that we can identify the problem that we're dealing with clarity, because I believe that in order to solve the problem, it's imperative that we name it. A problem well defined is half solved.
Yeah.
And the problem, if I can just lay it out in one sentence, it is the perpetuation of the status quo. Maintaining the status quo isn't avoiding a decision, it is a continuous past decision. So what are the past decisions that we are enabling by protecting the status quo? We're maintaining the pyramidal structures of organizations. We're maintaining power and economic asymmetry. We're maintaining tolerance of bad behavior in the organizations that we work in that would lead to degradation of mental health, that would lead to burnout. So I'm saying all this, Corey, that you asked a beautiful question. The fact that you've asked it, that joy has enabled a space for us to talk about it, and that you've unleashed me to give my answer, is hopefully going to, at the very least, plant the seed of dissent from the status quo in the listeners. And that's all we can hope for.
Yes, and I think that, it's being open to all information, both sides, good, bad, ugly, you name it. Because as you said, you can't make a decision unless you try and get as full a picture as you can. I think you've answered that really, really well. And I
Thank
know
you.
we've only got like 10 minutes left. And there's another question which we've got here. Got another one from Corey following on as well.
Thank you, Corey.
She kind of says she agrees with your observations. And how do we help to make that change, focusing on these negatives while trying to find the positives? So Corey has got a follow on from that, but
Yeah.
but Corey, we don't have the time today to go. I think
I can give you a
Hamza's
quick
got another
answer.
book. Hamza has another book coming on. I think that's
Yes.
what's brewing. And when you mention that creativity that's brewing in you, there's something going down here. But Yannick wanted to add to the conversation as well. And this was round, we were talking about perhaps your concern for your niece and me for younger people too. Would it be necessary to educate children about workplace intelligence? So I love the way that intelligence is being put at the end of everything, because, yeah, let's get smart about it. As for many people, diving into the workplace starts around the age of 16, or for many, 18 or older. And we just aren't prepared to live so many hours to unknown people. Probably to give, probably G. I type when I make mistakes. So it's about the hours that we give to somebody else, to a place. And because, as I mentioned before, we will need the workplace as employers, entrepreneurs, or employees. Right. Okay. So there are places where they're going to be fitting into, I think. And am I making this make sense?
Yeah, no, I get the spirit of the question, Yannick. This
Yannick,
is
I'm so
great.
sorry for ruining your question, but Hamza
No,
has
no,
got the gist of it.
I think you did a good job of expressing it as well, Joy. Real quick, just in one sentence, Corey, to answer your previous question, choose love over fear. As pedestrian as that sounds, as pedantic as that sounds, that is truly the solution here. Every decision you can make, every decision I can make and Joy can make and everyone watching this can make, is either going to perpetuate a cycle of fear or help us escape from that cycle of fear and go into a cycle of love, one of abundance, play, creativity, so on and so forth. So make the love-based decision as often as you can. That would be my solution. That is also the model at the heart of the next book or spoken word project. But now to Yannick's question. The answer is, if there's ever an opportunity to educate people and illuminate blind spots for them, we have to take it. And so increasing the intelligence of today's children who are going to become tomorrow's productive citizens is an imperative. There's no greater calling, in my opinion. I think that we all have an obligation to help each other, to co-liberate each other from the forces that oppress us, and transcend poverty, ignorance, and vulnerability. Raise the floor, and we can
Raise
talk
our
about what
standards, raise our standards of expectation.
just minimize
Yes.
abject suffering,
Yeah.
minimize primitive ancestral level threats. The things that we're experiencing in 2023, it feels like
Yeah.
we've entered into a new state of nature that would resemble what our ancestors would have experienced 10,000 years ago on the savannah, right? Predation by wild cats, getting effed up by snakes and having livestock and children pecked away by birds of prey. I mean, we're still dealing with that kind of fear, but in a modern, sometimes more subtle way in the workplace. So
Yes.
yes,
It's it's
absolutely
it's not
educate
it's not
children.
described in the kind of very, macabre way that you have, but it's invisible, but it's felt.
Yeah, I mean,
So
it
I hear
happens
where
in
you're
such a it's
going.
it happens
Yeah,
in such a subtle way with a
yeah.
boss saying to you, "This meeting doesn't concern you." Right? If imagine a boss says, "Hey, you know what? We're talking about you in this room. We're making decisions about how much money you're going to make at the end of the year to take care of your bills, to feed your family, but you are not involved in this conversation. I need to have this discussion with the shareholders." What? What are we talking
Mm.
about? Like, treat me like a human being. Don't engage in this dehumanizing practice that's only going to disengage me and lead down the spirals that we talked about earlier. So
A
absolutely educate children from an early age about what they can expect in the world of work. That's the first vector that we have to follow, which is always educate to the best of our ability everyone in society. And then the onus is also on us to do the same for the leaders, so that they're not creating systems that would attract and engage the dark triad leaders and the
so
dark
you're
core of
getting
personality.
the repeats of everything. Yeah.
It has to be a
Okay.
pincer attack. We have to
Yeah.
approach this from both
Yeah.
sides.
Yeah. Great answer. Hamza, this is a long conversation. I can see we could go on for another couple of hours. And Corey wants to say, choosing love over fear. Let's get that up there.
Thank
Love
you.
over fear. Yay.
Corey, I
Into
appreciate
that
you
one.
sharing that,
Into that
because
one.
in
Yeah.
my head, that sounds so ridiculous. You have to understand, like, I come from a background where it was fear driven. I optimized for dark triad traits early in my career. I grew up in a priority neighborhood. I spent some time in the Canadian Armed Forces. I truly believed in like toxic hustle culture at the time. So for me, at my age, at this point in the game, to say choose love over fear, it feels absurd every time it comes out of my head. So for you to receive that the way that you did is the supreme validation.
It
Thank you.
means that
Because I know it's true. I'm not like I don't have any tattoos, but if I could get any tattoo, that would be the one. That's how much I believe in this idea that I'm willing to etch it on my body.
Hamza, it just means that you're of an age where you care about the world and you want to make a difference. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Okay. So you don't have to apologize for saying things like choose love over fear. All the old fashioned ideas around being spiritual and caring about the world on another level. People aren't so picky about it anymore. They're not so terrified. People are embracing these ideas because I think at the core of us, we feel it to be true. And
We
I go
do,
with
Joy.
feelings. I go with feelings. I feel it to be true. So
We
that's the
do.
difference between using your emotions to guide what's happening to you in life. Emotion intelligence, call it your own inner guidance, your intuition, whatever you want to call it. But I go with my feelings. If something feels wrong and I can't intrinsically see what that is, I will begin to question it. If it feels right, then I also go with that too. But these are long, deep conversations. We have like 2 minutes left, and I
Sure,
want to
sure.
make
Yeah, yeah,
sure
yeah.
that people know how to contact you, Hamza. So, with that coming up, I'm going to make sure that I do that completely properly. So you can contact Hamza. Hamza, is that a good place to contact you
That's
at?
perfect.
Your
All of my
website?
links are there. You can
Your
find my
website?
email address. You can scroll to the bottom, see all my social media links. You can subscribe to my newsletter. But there's a chance that you're probably watching this on LinkedIn right now. So you can just add me on LinkedIn.
Great. You must be up way past all your connections by now. But anyway, that's very generous of you. And the other place you just mentioned was if it's a way of promoting it. It's promoting your
Yes.
newsletter, isn't it?
Yes, and let me
Substack.
sell this. Let me sell this. I'm so passionate about this. This is me finding my groove again as a writer. Every time I publish a book, it just takes everything out of me. I don't know what it's like to give birth to a child, but I imagine the closest equivalent that I have in my life is the publication of a book. It's like my entire being goes into the production of this thing that is then out in the world and lives its own life. And then I'm exhausted for like several months, if not years after the fact. And so after publishing Leadership Reinvented during the pandemic, I went through a bit of writer's block, and I'm only now finding my groove again. And as I'm warming up to write book 3, I am publishing some stuff on a weekly basis, and you're getting it on LinkedIn. You're also getting it on khanhamza.substack.com. These are 100% original ideas from my heart, from my brain to you. There's no ghostwriting. There's no chat GPT here. In a world of noise, this is just signal after signal after signal. And so I hope that you get as much value from reading these posts as I get in writing them for you. And I'm not going to stop. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'm just getting going.
Beautiful stuff. I can see that I'm going to be getting you back on. I can see that, just to see
I'm in.
what direction this is all taking. And people are saying really, loving what you're saying. And Yannick saying lots of love from
Respect.
Canada.
Thank you, Yannick.
And, I'm sure Corey's really, really happy with that answer too. So yeah. And everyone else whose comments I can't see and I haven't been able to deal with, but we're 1 minute over time. So I do like to keep things within the frame of our expectations. That's my job to do the timekeeping. So, Hamza, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I know you're tired, so I have to be mindful of not allowing your free flowing, almost half asleep stuff to come out on screen. That's my job to rein that in a bit. So I've been keeping an eye on you because I'm very much into that whole thing about mental care and emotional care. Very, very important things. But you said some amazing things I've not heard before.
Wow.
Definitely not on your TED Talks. So this is another TED Talk number 3, I think, to let you back up and get you to say that. But I think you mentioned there are ways in which we can feel that we're making a difference, because the thing that we can all begin to feel is that we don't have any power or control, and that's
Yeah.
when we can go to some very, very uncomfortable places ourselves. So regaining some power, regaining some control in your life in whatever way that you can, and if it's through your writing, so we can all share some of these ideas, then that's the way to do it. We can make an impact on the world, and today, right now, doing our live, we are making an impact on the world. We don't know what the butterfly effect is going to be, Hamza, but I know it's going to be good because there's a lot of juicy stuff in there. So I want to say thank you very much for being a guest. You just said yes to me. I'm like, Hamza, I looked at your profile. I thought he's up there in the clouds. He's not going to say yes to
Oh
me.
my
And
goodness.
you just went,
Never
yes.
that.
And
Never
you've been
that.
so humble as well. I've been so impressed at the humility that you've shown all the time. So you don't have to wear all these accolades on your sleeve. You're just a human being who cares. And that's what came across to me today. So
Truly.
I'm so appreciative of you being here. And you need to get some sleep. You must not run yourself into the ground. Go get 8 hours, do what you need to do. But this doesn't look like a tired man, does it? No, doesn't at all.
I am not tired. I could do this for another 5 hours, honestly, Joy. Thank you.
Well,
I
me
don't
and
want.
you are going to have to do a private session where we talk and get stuff out, and perhaps I might help you to write your book. Who knows where it's going to go? But
Who
it's been
knows?
a
But
great
Joy,
session.
no,
I
thank you.
appreciate it.
I
I
and, and I
appreciate.
and I appreciate you. You did a fabulous job of asking questions. We didn't get a chance to. I didn't get a chance to ask you the questions that I had of you. I want to learn about you. I want to learn about your work. I want to learn about what's motivating you and the impact that you're hoping to make through your work and just through your being.
We'll
But
make some
I want to
time.
thank you sincerely for the opportunity to speak with you. To cross time zones, to introduce me to your network, and for the joy that you are bringing to every interaction that we have, that we're going to have, but also to the world of LinkedIn, especially having this conversation amidst the backdrop of a triple black swan event, the lasting effects of a plague, ongoing wars, and a recession. So for us to have a conversation about choosing love over fear, about stopping managing and starting leading, about burning bright and not out, it's a truly beautiful thing, and it gives meaning to my life. And I know that my ancestors and yours are grateful for this exchange. So thank you.
Thank you, Hamza. And on that really, really happy note, everyone. Wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You can find out more from Hamza on LinkedIn, or come back to me and ask me questions if you're trying to get through to Hamza. But it's another doorway that's opened up in the world, and we have to remember the impact that we can still have on the world, and that is by having conversations. So, Hamza, I thank you so much. And we're going to hit the button, end the live stream, and there
Thank
might
you,
be a
everyone.
round two. I think there'll be a round two. I'm sure
I
you're
would
all
love it.
thinking there'll definitely be a round two. So I'm going to
I'm
hit the
in.
button,
Round
say goodbye
200.
to
Let's do it.
everyone. I'll let you have the last word. Go on. Why not?
No, good.
No, go on, me. Okay, I'll have the last word. So everyone, catch up with you all soon, and we'll catch up with Hamza again. I think part two is definitely on the cards.